Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Mellender, and I'm here working with the rookies one more time to do some possible paintovers, demos, or art discussions. If this is your first time at one of these, I'm an artist, concept artist, 3D, 2D, anything that comes along in film, television, video games, illustration, whatever I can find. And the purpose of these is to give feedback to starting artists or anyone who happens to join in. It's open to everyone. Oftentimes, I'll do paintovers, discuss ideas behind art and motivations as to why. But we can also do things like portfolio reviews, discuss hiring tactics, anything along those lines that you'd like to cover. Um, for this evening, I'm going to start out doing a bit of a demo with my own work. And then as questions come up, or if people post work, or if we look through some portfolios, I'll grab one of those and we can go from there and do some analysis and paint over. Feel free to ping me on YouTube or Discord if there's any audio or video problems that you happen to notice. So without further ado, I'll switch over to the drawing I'm working on and proceed from there. From Edge, I just got a question. How often will I be live over the next 2 weeks? I'm doing these on Tuesdays and Thursday evenings, Pacific Standard Time. But we're also talking about doing a couple of sessions at other times for other regions. Yeah, for the next couple of weeks on Tuesdays and Thursdays that I know of. Um, while I'm working on the nose here for a second, recently, this is just a piece of anecdote, and a criticism. Recently, I saw a couple of tutorials or quick how to draw online videos that were going over how to draw a nose um, using 3 circles. Um, I would not recommend this type of procedural tactic for drawing noses to anyone. It's a very simplified and uninteresting way of getting a nose. Part of what makes noses interesting and where they are important features on the face is aside from being like dead center in the middle of the stage of the face, they also work like a kind of compass. And there are several different types of shaping and attention signals on noses that humans are attuned to. So the different shaping and bulges and idiosyncrasies help us understand and discern unique characteristics of people. So working on the idea that you can learn to build noses or get an idea of noses from simple circles, or some type of procedural recipe driven method, is actually going to hinder you. You're going to be taking time on a thing that you're going to have to unlearn and will misdirect. It's drawing noses is an interesting thing because they do hold so much information. There's not a simple way to do it, and at times, depending on um, the type of nose you're doing, the cartilage or musculature or bony ridges will show up more or less. Not to mention changes in color, things along those lines. There's no simple way to do it, but it brings to mind for me a puzzle or a bit of a question as to why somebody would want to make drawing easy. Part of the thing with drawing and going about this or trying to do any type of art for a living is that it's interesting. It doesn't need procedures and methods to make it not difficult, because the difficulties aren't really difficulties. They're part of the, I hate to sound cutesy or inspirational around this, but they are part of the adventure of it and part of the discovery of it, the treasure. And trying to get away from doing the treasure parts seems a little counter the purpose. So if you should happen to see any tutorials that are recipe driven as to how to shortcut or easily draw a thing, go about approaching those with caution, because they in a lot of ways make the worst cause seem the better. Drawing, if you've decided to become an artist, likely it's because you actually enjoy the problem solving and the puzzles, and the easy way out will actually be much less satisfying than uh, trying to find a quick, easy fix. Sorry, that's my sermon for this evening. The question came up, what software am I using? I'm using Krita. It's free software. Actually, I'll at some point I'll put a link in in the Discord or also on the YouTube presentation also. But I jump back and forth between any programs I can get. Like when I'm working on my iPad, I use Procreate. I've come to really like Krita, but I'll easily I tend not to cling too much to any one software. They all have their pros and cons, but I also uh, fairly interchangeably jump into Photoshop and will often spend a week or so just using that as my drawing software, or also Corel Painter. I tend to go by favorite types of functions of the tool. So with Krita, I like it because it has brushes that work fairly simply. That the most that I change or do anything with them is alter the size and the opacity. Um, there are some pretty decent preset brushes, and I've made a few of my own that I find that I have to work with them as little in terms of the preparation or idiosyncrasies. Uh, there are few of them. So anything that's more pencil-like, I tend to gravitate toward. So the simplicity of the program, but it's got complexity too. I don't want to make it sound like it's not a full functioning capable program. Um, I use it simply. I use it because it has a lot of simple functions that I can just jump in and draw without it with it being most like traditional drawing. That said, I do think any of these effects or whatnot can be derived from any software that anyone might want to uh, try out. As I say, I am using the simplest modes. I look like Pablo Picasso. Any likeness to anyone living or dead is purely coincidental. Maybe. Um, the question came up: are you drawing from reference that you have there, or just straight from memory? I'm not drawing from reference, but I wouldn't say I'm drawing from memory either. This is um, it, you know, I it's I wow, this is more difficult to say than I was expecting. I tend to think of it as drawing from imagination, um, with also some caveats around that. Uh, a lot of understanding mechanisms and calculating what things should be is part of it. So it's not like memory, like I'm drawing on things I've seen, drawing from things I've seen and calling back. It's more that, I can actually, I think I can give a demonstration of how I'm thinking on the fly. Uh, let me let me prep it just a little bit. So so for a picture like this guy, um, the way I'm usually thinking about it is uh, thinking of the parts of a skull, basically those things that don't move and aren't flexible. So I start thinking of the bony extrusions, what parts tend to stand out more, how they're, for example, here positioned in space and overlapping and occluding one another. Um, some areas like the ridge of the eye and how it relates in position to the inner part of the jaw for some quick positioning. Then I tend to think of the angles and how the angles of these structures don't coordinate and how they do. So where they complement each other and where they set up um, lines that will create intersections. When after I go over the bony extrusions, then I start thinking of and configuring the um, flexible tissue, the flexing tissue as well. So I start thinking of the what can move and where, and in a sense, and I don't really puzzle it through because I've done it long enough and become familiar enough with it to understand the areas of peak flexibility, like the corrugator muscles, and in a sense, thinking of them as where they anchor, something like this, and knowing that they have a strength of flexibility as well as a fall off. So that can help give over information. I also start at this point, once I get the general pieces in that will start to describe a structure in space. That's when I start to think about what type of character it is that I'm doing. What do they look like? What are their particular idiosyncrasies? Yeah, just it goes from there, building and reconfiguring a lot based on internal storytelling. Like my initial idea for this was a, grave digger, possibly from the turn of the 20th century or turn of the 19th century, and possibly coming from the areas around, let's say, West Virginia, or somewhere where possibly somewhere in Appalachia, giving him possibly some English style features, but showing some of the wear and tear that can go along with sunburning. Um, Possibly having alopecia. I didn't want him to have a lot of hair or signs of hair, things that can soften and beautify, but make him almost look like he's somewhat the dead himself. So it's a number of things go into stacking how the idea eventually presents itself. So it's I wouldn't say it's memory. I'd say it may be a lot like imagination, having things that are mixes of experience and reconfiguring um, uh, variables and properties that I might be familiar with in life. So I also can't say that memory isn't involved. It just wouldn't be I'm deriving the idea as if using my memory as a reference. Did that answer make any sense, by the way? If not, feel free to ask me to clarify any part on that, and I'll see if I can give a better reply. A thing that might be of note here and of interest. Um, I'm setting up some of his posture, and postural pieces are incredibly informative. Um, and I think they're often not used. And I don't know, I'm being so hypercritical tonight. I do notice in a lot of current work and a lot of work from students and work that tends to be popular is poses that um, aren't especially character driven. They are often more driven by um, rote or almost a type of emblem. So, like for example, will mention like the superhero pose and things along those lines, where it's a branded type of stance, as opposed to how people stand who are in different emotional states or take on different uh, social positions using their posture as the key to do so. We use our posture quite a bit for that. Like, for example, when we're showing fatigue, it's we almost well we do, like, our backs will become weary and whatnot, but we also take on and add to those dramatic flair so that we're communicating, even though it's accidental. We're communicating as if more of a weight and burden are actually sitting on us, like we have a real world object on our shoulders. We tend to do a lot of posturing and gestures with our entire figure and how we stand, our various stances. This usually has to do with weighting. And there's a property called parapersonal space. And this is how our brain deals with extra objects that we either hold, like if we're using a hammer, our brain will actually extend out our sense of body into the hammer. Or when we're driving a car, we fill out the car, and that's known as parapersonal space. We use an imaginary parapersonal space, though, as well, and part of communication, and also to indicate drama, which is a large part of our general interactions with others. We tend to overinflate. It's almost a type of lying that we use. With posture, like when somebody stands erect and it's super erect, they're often positioning themselves as if they've tilted the world and they're, the phrase, looking down their nose at you because they're taller. But they'll often do it with slowness, as if not only are they taller, but a great weight and burden is on their shoulders that they're pushing up because they're showing you how mighty they are. So standing isn't just standing erect and looking tall. Standing erect has a timeline to it that also increases a perception or a communication of strength and grandness. So with this figure and using a static image, like how do I present something like that? How do I present a figure who's upright and who's got a bit of a condescending stance? How do I indicate that? There's a number of things I want to keep in mind with it. Is one, I don't want him to be like a majestic, magnificent figure. I don't want him to be somebody who you'd look at and go, well, when he's got his dignity on, he's actually formidable. I want it to maintain that he's kind of a stringy, lined, um, tendinous creature. And at the same time, also that he's somehow menacing, somehow disturbing. Again, I want that feeling of death around him, not just to be his occupation, but to also be his. He's infected with it. So a number of things I would think of with that is I want the the area of his shoulders and head to be one type of storytelling. The bust basically as an area that tells a story by itself as you scan it. But as the rest of the body configures, I also want him to look like his hips are somewhat underslung, indicating like problems of health and posture, and then compensations along those lines, possibly even making him somewhat knock-kneed, so that his position and pose show two different things. One, he's imitating to you his mightiness. There may even be something intimidating and menacing, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that he's also bone-like and death-like and frail, and has a different set of intimidation and disturbance. And his unwellness itself is an emotional factor, something that can cause chills and fear and discomfort. And anyone who has questions on that type of thinking on how to go over a character and use their bodies as more than just snapshot stances, but layered versions of storytelling, feel free. As I'm working on it, we can try to ping and uh, pick out different parts of that idea as we go. There's a thing, and right now I'm puzzling over how to best address a couple of things with his stance. I've started to notice, and I do think it's always important when you're working on any piece to keep in mind new things as they pop up, and how you might want to incorporate surprises or opportunities as they appear in your work. He's got a bit of a crow-like demeanor to him, and I'm wondering how far I might want to take something like that. A couple of the considerations of that include like making his legs a little more bird-like, even, or making his feet in such a way that they seem like they should be positioned three-toed or anything along those lines. In other words, setting the balance so that it looks like he's weighing on a foot that has features that aren't there. But one of the things that I'm considering with it is elbows out or elbows in, almost like a bird with its wings folded down. Um, the advantages and disadvantages of that are elbows out tend to be a little stronger stance. Um, your elbows away from your body, you aren't squeezing yourself in. There's no protecting thing. Things tend to be a little more at ease. Elbows in can be a stance of protecting your organs or high tension, your body enclosed. So um, I actually don't think I'm going to solve that tonight. I may leave that hanging and think on that a little bit, and what might be best as I go in the future with it. Um, there, a thing. Actually, I heard. I got a couple of emails today from different people looking for advice or some feedback. And one of them had to do with like when a picture is done, or how do you go about setting the discipline of drawing. um, I and my answer is I don't. I think a lot of these things might be superstition. I draw according to my interest and when and where I'm interested in the piece. If I don't have the answers, for example, today, I don't feel a strong need to uh, chase after it, there's time. It's like there's time for me to keep going and learn things and address those pieces that I do know right now and can figure out right now easily, that need to be part of the picture as well. This is I work in doing contracts. This is also how I handle contracts and professional work as well. I tend not to become very stressed about it or worry about deadlines or anything along those lines, even when they're coming up close and pressing, because one, once you've learned to solve certain problems, you don't have to worry about whether or not this one time it's not going to work. That's a little superstitious. You're probably going to know how to solve the problems that you're looking at. A An aspect of problem solving and not problem solving is overworking and stressing yourself out, following stressful habits that don't help the situation of trying to come to an idea, but they feel like you should be working or laboring very hard to come to a conclusion. And it's a mistake that people make often. They think that if they force the issue, that it will, they'll get somewhere somehow by bullying themselves into laboring where they don't have answers, it will come to pass. And it's just not true. It doesn't work out that way. Oftentimes, if you take a 5-10 minute break or leave it aside for a bit, you give your brain enough relaxation or rest to deal with the problem in a relaxed, intuitive way. There's I worked at a game studio once where micromanaging was thought of as a good technique, but what it did was it drove everybody crazy, and productivity and quality went down horribly because of it. And the relief of everyone stopping and stop burdening under micromanagement and being informed that the art staff, for example, that their art director and their leads and stuff were on their side and we could problem solve together. The problem solving became much easier and sorted itself out very quickly, because there's nothing more damaging to your work than to be anxiety driven. So not being able to solve the problem tonight, even if this was due in like 3 days or an important piece, I wouldn't worry about it one bit at all. I know that it's very important to not worry. Worry is actually a burdensome thing that damages work. And if you don't mind me asking, everyone out there, is this kind of advice or things along these lines, things that are helpful or might be points of interest, or would you like me to address some other things and other topics? The question came up from Eric Pudding. um, um, Hi, I'm an animation student from Canada. I'm very new to the rookies community. I've been trying to learn how to paint environments. Do you have any tips or book recommendations? Let me think. I can't right off think of any particular book, and some of the ones I'm thinking of actually are kind of old from like the famous artists course. There's some overviews, uh, and there's like Jack Ham. These are really old books, like from the 1950s. He did a book on environments and whatnot. I I think there's a few different areas you can go to. Like for any type of rendering, I think Scott Robertson's book on rendering is actually a very good resource. He does couple of sections on environments and environmental lighting, but I like when I work on environments, I tend not to think of them grouped as environments. Like with even figures, I tend to think of things more in terms of what each particular thing is. So it's like working on an environment, your cliffs, atmospheric things, um, anything that you're going to be drawing is going to have some uniqueness to it, as well as like properties of things in the natural world, or properties of like cleavage for rocks, or there's going to be things that have mechanical causes to them, and then there's going to be areas where you're going to want to jump away from that to make unique artistic pieces. um, I wouldn't suggest necessarily any particular course or thing will do that. I would suggest first trying out uh, environments, taking a look at your work, possibly asking if you can get the input from them, some experts on that, on environments, but also go through and make as many mistakes as you can. Do environments in the most beginner way you can, and then stop and evaluate it and go, why doesn't this look right? And actually make lists for yourself. Things along the lines of, well, this doesn't look real. Well, what does it mean for it not to look real? What are the properties of real that I'm thinking of? Are the lines too clear? Do the rocks look too blobby? Are the trees not interesting enough? Am I getting the different types of perspective? Like, is aerial perspective right? Are my angles right? Uh, Anything along these lines. Um, I don't know there's a book or a course that can shortcut you. There are probably ways that can start to inform you. Um, yeesh. I would grab anything online, anything that, if you like the look of an artist, and like you go to YouTube, look up environment art tutorial. If you like the look of their work, give it a listen to, see what they say, things along those lines. Particular schools or anything along those lines, I really couldn't say. I'm not familiar enough with which schools might be best for environment and training for environments. Okay. Well, I think we're coming up on an hour here, and I'll start to close out. If there are any questions or comments on the work that I was just working on, or any of the any of my free floating opinions as I was going through there, feel free to contact me through Rookie's Discord or my email, paul@paulmellender.com. And I'll be doing this again on next Tuesday and next Thursday. Feel free to put in any work you might want to have for paintovers or analysis or discussion. Send it along to the rookies, and we'll give it a look at. I hope that was interesting and enjoyable. And take care. Thank you.